They looked at his worn-out coat and saw a beggar. They looked at his quiet demeanor and saw a nobody. For 45 minutes, the wealthiest man in the room sat ignored by every single person at the Obsidian except for one waitress who was barely hanging on to her job. But when the insults started flying and the manager moved to kick him out, she didn't just defend him. She spoke 6 words that froze the entire room. What happened next wasn't just a scene. It was a reckoning that would destroy careers and change a life forever. This is the story of the silence that screamed. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grays darker. Sasha Miller adjusted her apron, wincing as the stiff fabric dug into a bruise on her hip, a souvenir from bumping into the prep table earlier that frantic evening. It was a Friday night at the Obsidian, the kind of restaurant where the water was imported from glaciers and the clientele imported their personalities from lifestyle magazines. Sasha was 26, but her eyes held the exhaustion of someone twice her age. She brushed a stray strand of blonde hair behind her ear and scanned her section. Table 4 wanted more Pinot Noir. Table 6 was complaining that the Wagyu was too tender, a complaint Sasha hadn't even known was linguistically possible until tonight. And then there was Table 1, the power table. Occupying the prime real estate near the floor-to-ceiling windows sat Julian Blackwood. Julian was a hedge fund manager who wore his arrogance like a second skin. He was currently entertaining 3 other men in suits that cost more than Sasha's annual rent. They were loud, brash, and had already sent back a bottle of wine because the cork didn't smell authentic. Garçon! Julian snapped his fingers. He didn't look at Sasha, just at the empty space where he expected her to materialize. Where's the damn bread? Coming right up, Mr. Blackwood, Sasha said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack her face. She rushed to the kitchen, dodging the frantic sous chef. Move, Miller, the manager to Roger barked. Roger was a short man with a Napoleon complex and a shiny forehead. He hated Sasha, not for any specific reason, but because she was quiet, and Roger interpreted silence as insubordination. We have a VIP coming in soon. I want table 9 cleared and reserved. Do not mess this up. Yes, Roger, she murmured. When she returned to the floor with Julian's bread, the atmosphere had shifted. The heavy oak doors at the front had swung open, letting in a gust of cold, wet wind. Standing in the entryway was an old man. He was small, perhaps in his late 70s, with stooped shoulders and a shock of thinning white hair and plastered to his forehead by the rain. He wore a beige trench coat that had seen better decades. The hem was frayed, and there were dark stains near the pockets. Beneath it, a simple plaid shirt and loose trousers. He clutched a wet umbrella with a handle taped together with electrical tape. The hostess, an aspiring model named Chloe who guarded the reservation book like Cerberus, didn't even look up from her iPad initially. When she finally did, her nose wrinkled visibly. Delivery entrance is around the back, Chloe said, her voice dripping with dismissive boredom. The old man blinked, wiping rain from his glasses. Profound apologies, he said, his voice soft, heavily accented. I wish to eat. Table for 1. We are fully booked, Chloe lied instantly. The restaurant was busy, yes, but there were 3 open two-tops near the kitchen. Everyone knew the policy. The Obsidian was for the elite. If you didn't look the part, you didn't get the seat. Please, the man said, shifting his weight. It is cold. I will be quick. Chloe sighed, rolling her eyes toward Roger, who was watching from the bar. Roger gave a subtle, dismissive wave of his hand, the universal gesture for get rid of him. But the old man didn't leave. He simply stood there dripping on the marble foyer, looking at the warmth of the dining room with a longing that tugged at something in Sasha's chest. Fine, Chloe huffed, realizing he wasn't budging and not wanting a scene near the entrance. I can seat you at the bar, but you can't stay long. Table, please, the man insisted gently. My legs, not so good. Chloe groaned audibly. She grabbed a menu and marched him not to a table, but to table 12, the worst seat in the house. It was right next to the swinging kitchen doors and directly under a drafty vent. It was the table they used to humiliate people into leaving early. Here, she dropped the menu. Server will be with you eventually. Sasha watched this unfold from across the room, her heart hammering. She knew that look in the old man's eyes. It wasn't just hunger. It was a specific kind of loneliness she recognized intimately. She started to move toward him, but Roger intercepted her. Don't even think about it, Miller, he hissed, grabbing her elbow. Focus on Blackwood. That old man probably can't afford a glass of water. Let him sit there until he gets uncomfortable and leaves. If he orders, make sure you see the cash first. Sasha pulled her arm away. He's a human being, Roger. He's a nuisance. Prioritize the money, Roger sneered, pushing her toward Julian's table. For the next 20 minutes, the old man became the invisible ghost of the obsidian. Waiters breezed past him, averting their eyes. The busboy refilled water glasses at every table except his. He sat with his hands folded neatly on the tablecloth, staring at the unlit candle in the center, waiting for acknowledgement that never came. At table one, Julian Blackwood had noticed the new addition. He had had 3 scotches and was feeling particularly cruel. Look at that, Julian boomed, gesturing with his fork toward the old man. They're letting the homeless shelter overflow into the dining room now. He turned to Roger. Roger, what is this? I'm trying to enjoy a $500 steak, and I have to smell wet dog. The table erupted in sycophantic laughter. The old man didn't react, but Sasha saw his hand tighten slightly on the handle of his taped-up umbrella, which was leaning against his chair. Hey, Grandpa, Julian shouted across the room. The soup kitchen is 5 blocks down. You lost. The restaurant went quiet. The cruelty was naked, ugly. Sasha froze. She was holding a tray of crystal flutes. She looked at Roger. Roger was smiling, actually smiling at Julian's joke. He wasn't going to stop it. He was enjoying the show. Something inside Sasha, a wall she had built to survive years of poverty and subservience, began to crack. She looked at the old man. He looked so small, so dignified in his silence. She remembered the promise she made to herself when she left her old life behind. Never be the one who looks away. Sasha set the tray down on a service station with a sharp clack. She ignored table 4, waving for the check. She ignored Roger's glare. She walked straight past the high rollers, past the judgment, and stood directly in front of table 12. The old man looked up, startled by her presence. His glasses were foggy. Good evening, sir, Sasha said, her voice trembling slightly, but gaining strength. She pulled a lighter from her apron and lit the candle on his table, casting a warm glow on his weathered face. I'm so sorry for the wait. My name is Sasha, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. She didn't know it yet, but that simple act of lighting a candle was the match that would burn the obsidian to the ground. The silence in the restaurant was heavy, textured with judgment. By acknowledging the man Julian Blackwood had just mocked, Sasha had openly defied the social hierarchy of the room. Sasha, Roger's voice was a low growl from the service station. Get back to your section. Sasha ignored him. She focused entirely on the guest. Up close, she saw details the others had missed. The stains on his coat weren't dirt. They were ink, sumi ink to be precise. The taped-up umbrella was actually a vintage wagasa, likely bamboo and oil paper, repaired with care rather than neglect. And his hands, they were calloused, but his fingernails were manicured to perfection. Thank you, the man said. His English was functional but labored, as if he had to translate every word in his head before speaking. I would like tea and fish. We have a lovely black cod, Sasha suggested gently. Or perhaps the tuna tartare. The man frowned, looking at the menu as if it were written in alien hieroglyphs. He seemed overwhelmed by the descriptions. Foam reduction, deconstructed. He rubbed his temples. I do not understand these words. Just simple fish. Grilled, rice. Do you have rice? From across the room, Julian let out a bark of laughter. Rice? He wants rice. Someone get him a bowl of Uncle Ben's. Roger marched over, his face red. He stepped right into Sasha's space, pushing her slightly aside. Listen, buddy, Roger said, his voice dripping with condescension. This is a French fusion bistro. We don't do bowls of rice. If you want takeout, go to Chinatown. You're disturbing my high-value guests. The old man shrank back, humiliation coloring his cheeks a deep crimson. He began to reach for his umbrella. I misunderstand. I go. No, Sasha said, the word hung in the air. Roger whipped his head around. Excuse me? I said no. Sasha repeated, her voice steady now. She turned her back on her manager and looked at the old man. She took a deep breath. She hadn't spoken the words in 5 years. Not since the accident, not since she fled the life she once knew. The syllables felt heavy on her tongue, rusty but familiar. She bowed a perfect, deeply respectful 45-degree bow. keeping her back straight and her hands clasped in front of her. When she straightened, she looked the old man in the eye and spoke in flawless Japanese. Irashaimase. Welcome, honored guest. The food here is complicated, but allow me to explain. I will ensure we prepare something that suits your taste. The reaction was instantaneous. The old man's eyes went wide. His jaw dropped slightly. The fearful, confused tension in his shoulders evaporated, replaced by a shock of pure recognition. Roger stood with his mouth open, looking like a fish gasping for air. He had known Sasha for 2 years. He knew she drove a beat-up Honda Civic and lived in a studio apartment in Astoria, Queens. He did not know she spoke fluent high-register Japanese. You, the old man gasped, answering in his native tongue. You speak, and not just speak. That is the Kyoto dialect, the formal register. Sasha smiled, and for the first time that night, it was genuine. She replied in Japanese, her voice lowering to a soothing professional cadence. I lived in Kansai for many years. Sir, please ignore the noise around us. It is just wind in the bamboo. Let me bring you the black cod. I will have the chef prepare it simply with soy and ginger, and I will personally steam a side of rice for you. We have some for the staff meal. It would be my honor. The old man looked at her, really looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were dark and piercing, intelligent in a way that made Sasha feel like he was reading her soul. My name is Kao, he said softly. You are very kind, Kao-san, she replied. She turned to head to the kitchen and found her path blocked by Roger. He looked furious, confused, and terrified all at once. What the hell was that? He hissed. Since when do you speak that? Since I was 3, Sasha said coldly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a VIP guest to serve. Unless you want to explain to the owner why you refused service to a paying customer based on his coat. Roger stepped aside, stunned. But the drama wasn't over. As Sasha moved toward the kitchen, Julian Blackwood stood up. He had had enough. He didn't like being ignored, and he certainly didn't like the help showing off. Hey, Jap girl, Julian shouted. The slur cut through the room like a knife. Sasha stopped. She didn't turn around. Her knuckles turned white on her tray. Julian laughed, looking around for approval. What? She's clearly confused about where she is. This is America, honey. Speak English or get out. He turned his glare to Cal. And you? I'm tired of looking at you. I'm buying the restaurant out for the next hour. Private party. That means you leave now. Julian pulled out a black credit card and slammed it on his table. Roger, get the bouncer. Get this trash out of my sight. Roger looked at the credit card, an Amex Centurion, then at Cal. It was a no-brainer for a man like Roger. Money talked. Sasha, Roger said, his voice flat. Get him out now. Mr. Blackwood is renting the space. Sasha looked at Cal. The old man hadn't moved. He was calmly cleaning his glasses with a napkin. He placed them back on his nose, looked at Julian, then at Roger, and finally at Sasha. He smiled, a small, sad smile. Sasha-san, Cal said in clear English this time so everyone could hear. Is this man the owner? No, Sasha said, glaring at Julian. He is just a man with a loud voice and a small heart. Julian's face turned purple. That's it. You're fired. Roger, fire her right now or I pull my investments from your parent company. Roger panicked. Sasha, you're done. Get out. Take the old guy with you. Sasha untied her apron. She let it drop to the floor. Fine, I'm leaving, but I'm taking my guest with me to a place that respects him. She walked over to Kao and offered him her arm. Shall we go, Kao-san? I know a noodle shop 3 blocks away. It is not fancy, but the broth is honest. Kao stood up slowly. He took her arm, but he didn't walk toward the door. Instead, he reached into the inner pocket of his tattered trench coat. Wait one moment, Cal said. His voice was no longer soft. It carried a steel timbre that echoed off the walls. He pulled out a phone, not a smartphone, but an old blocky satellite phone. He dialed a single number, held it to his ear, and waited 3 seconds. It is me, Kwakumi, Cal said into the phone. Cancel the acquisition of the Blackwood Fund. Yes, immediately. Kill the deal. Julian Blackwood froze. His glass hovered halfway to his mouth. Cal listened for a moment, then spoke again. And call the CEO of Obsidian Hospitality Group. Tell him I am standing in his flagship restaurant, and I am currently being evicted by a man named Roger. Cal closed the phone with a snap. He looked at Julian, whose face had drained of all color. You should check your email, Mr. Blackwood, Cal said. I believe your net worth is about to adjust. The silence that followed Cal's statement was different from the silence before. Before, it was the silence of awkward judgment. Now it was the silence of a vacuum, the kind that happens right before an explosion. Julian Blackwood stared at the old man. A nervous chuckle escaped his lips, sounding like dry leaves crunching. You, you canceled the deal? Who do you think you are, Santa Claus? But the other men at Julian's table weren't laughing. The man to Julian's left, a senior partner named David, was staring at his BlackBerry under the table. His face had gone the color of ash. Julian, David whispered, his voice trembling. Not now, David. I'm dealing with this. Look at the ticker, David screamed, shattering the restaurant's decorum. Julian fumbled for his phone. He opened his trading app. The graph for Blackwood Capital, usually a steady green line, was now a vertical red cliff. In the last 30 seconds, the stock had plummeted by 14%. Trading had been halted due to volatility. A notification banner scrolled across the top of his screen. Breaking, Yamato Heavy Industries withdraws bid for Blackwood Capital, citing ethical concerns regarding leadership. Julian looked up, his eyes bulging. He looked at the old man in the stained trench coat. Yamato, you are Kao Yamato. Kao didn't answer him. He was busy carefully folding his napkin. But Sasha said quietly from beside him, Yamato is the chairman of the board for the conglomerate that owns the bank that owns your mortgage. She remembered the face now. She had seen it in the financial papers her father used to read. Kao Yamato, the shogun of steel. A man worth $40 billion, known for his eccentric habit of walking the streets of cities he intended to buy, disguised as a commoner to see how regular people lived. Roger, the manager, was currently trying to make himself invisible behind the espresso machine. But the restaurant phone rang, a loud, shrill ring that seemed to echo Roger's doom. Chloe, the hostess, picked it up, listened for a second, and then went pale. She held the receiver out toward Roger. It's Mr. Henderson, the CEO. He's screaming, Roger. He says if Mr. Yamato walks out that door unhappy, you shouldn't bother coming home tonight. Roger lunged for the phone. Mr. Henderson, sir, it was a misunderstanding. He looked like a hobo. Roger stopped, wincing as the voice on the other end peeled the paint off the walls. Yes, sir, I understand right now, but... Roger slowly hung up the phone. He looked at Sasha. He looked at Cal. I'm fired, Roger whispered, and I'm blacklisted. Julian Blackwood was now standing, stumbling over his chair. The arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a desperate, oily panic. He rushed toward table 12. Mr. Yamato, please. Julian reached out but stopped short when Cal raised a single finger. It was a joke, just a bit of fun. I didn't recognize you. If you had known, Cal interrupted, his voice calm and terrible, you would have treated me with fake kindness. You would have kissed my ring while plotting to steal my watch. Cal stood up fully. Despite his height, he seemed to tower over Julian. I do not judge a man by how he treats his equals, Mr. Blackwood. I judge him by how he treats those he thinks are beneath him. Cal gestured to Sasha. You called her a slur. You threatened her livelihood. And for what? To make your friends laugh. Cal turned to the other men at table 1. Gentlemen, Yamato Industries is still interested in acquiring the assets of your firm. However, as long as Mr. Blackwood is employed there or holds any stock, or even steps foot in the building, the deal is dead, and I will make it my personal mission to short every stock you touch. David, the senior partner, stood up immediately. He looked at Julian with pure hatred. Julian, you're out. Pack your desks tonight. You can't do that, Julian shrieked. I built this fund, and you just destroyed it in 5 minutes because you wanted to bully an old man. David spat. Security will escort you out. Julian looked around the room. The diners who had laughed with him earlier were now studying their plates or looking at Cal with awe. He was alone, totally, utterly alone. He grabbed his coat and ran out of the restaurant into the rain, not even waiting for his valet ticket. Cal watched him go, then turned to Roger. The CEO told you to make me happy, Cal asked. Roger nodded vigorously, sweating profusely. Anything, Mr. Yamato, anything. I can comp the meal. I can get you the private room. I can apologize to her. Cal pointed to Sasha. Roger froze. To apologize to a billionaire was one thing. To apologize to a waitress he had bullied for 2 years was another. It broke his ego, but he had no choice. Sasha, Roger choked out. I'm sorry. On your knees, Cal said. The room gasped. Sasha's eyes widened. Cal-san, that is not necessary. It is necessary, Cal said softly to her in Japanese. Disrespect must be balanced by humility. Roger looked at the floor. He looked at the job he had just lost. He sank to his knees on the dirty restaurant floor right in front of Sasha's scuffed work shoes. "I'm sorry, Sasha," Roger said, his voice cracking. I was I was wrong." Sasha looked down at him. She felt no triumph, just a profound sense of exhaustion. "Get up, Roger," she said quietly. "You're ruining your pants." She turned to Cal. "Thank you, sir, but I think I'm done here." "Yes," Cal nodded. "You are done here. Get your coat, Sasha-san. We have noodles to eat." The rain had softened to a drizzle as they walked down 4th Avenue. The neon lights of the city reflected in the puddles, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that seemed to dance around them. Sasha had changed into her street clothes, jeans, and a thick wool sweater. She walked beside the billionaire, who was still clutching his taped-up umbrella. A black limousine was trailing them slowly about 50 feet back, its headlights cutting through the mist like predator eyes. Cal had dismissed his security detail, insisting on walking. For a long time, they didn't speak. Sasha was reeling. She had just lost her job, witnessed the destruction of a financier, and was now walking to a cheap noodle joint with one of the richest men in Asia. It felt like a fever dream. They reached Kenji's Ramen, a tiny hole-in-the-wall place with steamed-up windows and peeling paint. It was the only place in the city that made broth the way Sasha remembered it from her childhood. They sat in a booth in the back. Cal ordered 2 bowls of tonkotsu ramen and a bottle of sake. When the waitress left, he took off his foggy glasses and looked at Sasha. "You are wondering why I am here?" Cal said. "I'm wondering why you let Julian Blackwood sit there for 40 minutes before you destroyed him," Sasha said, taking a sip of water. "You could have ended it the moment he opened his mouth." Cal smiled. "To catch a rat? Ma charato. You must let it eat the cheese first. If I had stopped him early, he would have just been a rude man. By letting him continue, he revealed his true nature to his partners." "I didn't fire him, Sasha. His friends did. That is the most painful knife, the one held by a friend." He poured 2 small cups of sake and pushed one toward her. "But that is not what I wish to discuss," Cal said. His demeanor shifted. The playful old man vanished, replaced by the sharp, analytical tycoon. "I want to talk about you, Sasha Miller." He said her last name with a distinct pause. "You speak the Kyoto dialect," Cal noted. "Not just the words, but the rhythm, the silence between the words. You learned it young." "I told you I lived there," Sasha said, guarding her tone. "You bow with your left hand over your right," Cal continued. "That is the style of the Ogasawara School of Etiquette. Very old, very expensive. Waitresses do not learn that. Diplomats' daughters do." Sasha went still. She put her cup down. "Who are you?" "I'm a man with a long memory," Cal said. He reached into his coat pocket again, but this time he didn't pull out a phone. He pulled out an old, faded photograph. He slid it across the table. It was a picture taken maybe 15 years ago. It showed a younger Cal standing next to a tall American man with kind eyes and a sharp suit. They were shaking hands in front of a construction site in Tokyo. Sasha's breath hitched. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and touched the face of the American man. "Daddy," she whispered. "Robert Keating," Cal said softly. "One of the finest structural engineers I ever worked with. He built the foundations of my headquarters in Shinjuku." Sasha looked up, tears stinging her eyes. "He's dead. He died 5 years ago." "I know," Cal said. His voice was heavy with regret. "I heard he took his own life after the scandal." Sasha flinched. The scandal, the nightmare that had torn her life apart. Her father had been accused of embezzling millions from a construction project in Dubai. The press had eaten him alive. His assets were frozen, his reputation shattered. He swore he was innocent, that he was being framed by the developers to cover their own losses. But no one listened. No one listened. Just like tonight at the restaurant. Sasha Keating had changed her name to Sasha Miller, dyed her hair, and fled the circle of elites who had turned their backs on her family. She had been hiding in aprons and diners ever since, terrified that someone would recognize the daughter of the thief, Robert Keating. "He didn't do it," Sasha said, her voice fierce. "He was a good man. They framed him." "I know," Cal said simply. Sasha froze. You know?" "I investigated it," Cal said. 3 years ago, I found the discrepancies. It was not your father. It was a subcontractor named Vanguard Construction. They were siphoning materials and needed a scapegoat. Your father was too honest. He asked too many questions. So they destroyed him." Sasha felt the room spin. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you clear his name?" Kale looked down at his sake cup, because by the time I found out, Vanguard had been acquired, buried under layers of shell companies. The evidence was old, and I was a coward. I focused on my business. I thought, Robert is gone. What good will it do? He looked up, his eyes burning with intensity. But then I saw the name of the private equity firm that acquired Vanguard and hid the evidence. Sasha waited, her heart pounding against her ribs. It was Blackwood Capital, Cal said. The name hung in the air like smoke. Julian, Sasha gasped. Julian's father founded it. Julian ran the acquisition. Cal said, the man you served tonight, the man who mocked me, is the man who signed the papers that framed your father. Sasha felt a wave of nausea followed by a surge of white-hot rage. She remembered Julian's face, his laugh, the way he snapped his fingers. That man had built his fortune on her father's grave. I have been tracking Julian for months, Cal explained. I wanted to buy his company just to dismantle it, to find the files that prove your father's innocence. That is why I was at the Obsidian tonight. I was going to meet him incognito to gauge his character before the acquisition. And I saw enough, Cal said. I saw a man with no honor, but I also saw something else. I saw Robert's daughter standing tall, speaking truth to power. Cal reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. I owe a debt to your father, Sasha-san. I cannot bring him back, but I can give you the sword to clear his name. The ramen arrived, steaming and rich, but Sasha couldn't eat. Her mind was racing. What do you mean the sword? She asked. Cal took a slow slurp of noodles, savoring the broth. This ramen, it is good, honest. He wiped his mouth. I canceled the acquisition of Blackwood Capital. That will bankrupt them in the short term. Their stock is crashing, investors are fleeing, but men like Julian are like cockroaches. They survive. He has offshore accounts. He has connections. In 6 months, he will be back, rebranded. Cal leaned in. Unless we finish him. How? I need someone on the inside, Cal said. I am buying the majority share of the Obsidian Hospitality Group, the restaurant chain you just walked out of. I made the call in the car. The deal is done. Sasha blinked. You bought the restaurant chain because the manager was rude? I bought it because it is a distressed asset with potential, Cal corrected with a wink. And because I need a new CEO. Sasha laughed, a short, nervous sound. CEO? Cal-san, I'm a waitress. I have a degree in art history that I haven't used in 5 years. You are not a waitress, Cal said sternly. You are Robert Keating's daughter. You speak 3 languages. You understand protocol. You handled a hostile client, me, better than any executive I have met in 10 years. And most importantly, you have something Julian Blackwood lacks. What's that? Empathy, Kyo. And empathy, the Cal said. Business is not about numbers, Sasha. It is about people. If you can serve a beggar with dignity, you can lead a company with vision. He pulled a business card from his pocket. It was gold embossed. I'm creating a new subsidiary, Yamato Leisure. We will take over the Obsidian and its sister locations. I want you to run it. But that is just the cover. The cover for what? For the investigation, Cal said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Blackwood Capital used the Obsidian's corporate accounts to launder the money they stole from your father's project. It's all in the archives of the restaurant group. Digital footprints they thought no one would look for because they owned the place. As CEO, you will have access to everything. Every invoice, every email from 10 years ago. Sasha stared at him. It was a heist. A corporate heist disguised as a promotion. You want me to find the proof? She said. I want you to bury him, Cal replied. Julian thinks he is ruined because I pulled a deal. That is just money. I want you to find the evidence that sends him to prison. I want you to clear your name. I want Robert Keating to rest in peace. Sasha looked out the window. She saw her reflection in the glass. Faded makeup, tired eyes, a cheap sweater. Then she looked past the reflection to the city skyline. Somewhere in those towers, Julian Blackwood was probably calling his lawyers, trying to spin his way out of this. She thought of her father, the way he used to sit in his study, head in his hands, crying silently because the world called him a thief. She felt the fear, yes, but the rage was stronger. The desire for justice was burning her throat. Sasha looked back at Cal. She picked up the sake cup and drained it in one gulp. I don't have a suit, she said. Cal smiled, a wide, genuine grin that wrinkled the corners of his eyes. We will go to Ginza tomorrow, or Fifth Avenue. since we are here, I will buy you 50 suits. But first, he pointed to her bowl, eat. You cannot conquer the world on an empty stomach. 3 weeks later, the staff of the Obsidian were gathered in the main dining room. The tables were stripped bare, the chairs were stacked, the air was thick with nervous tension. Rumors had been flying, the restaurant had been sold, the management was being purged, a foreign billionaire was pulling the strings. The double doors swung open. It wasn't Roger who walked in. Roger was currently sitting in his studio apartment, refreshing his LinkedIn page for the 100th time. It was a woman. She wore a charcoal gray power suit that fit like armor. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. She carried a leather portfolio and walked with a cadence that commanded attention, the click-clack of her heels echoing off the marble floors like gunshots. Behind her walked Kao Yamato, looking like a silent guardian. The staff squinted. The woman looked familiar, but the context was all wrong. She stopped at the head of the room. She placed the portfolio on a table. She looked at the faces she had worked with for 2 years. The sous chef who drank on the job, the bus boys who worked harder than anyone, Chloe the hostess who was currently chewing gum and looking bored. "Good morning," Sasha said. Her voice was projected, clear, and devoid of the meekness that had defined her existence as a server. Chloe stopped chewing. Her eyes went wide. "Sasha." "Ms. Miller," Sasha corrected calmly. "Or Miss Keating, I'll answer to either." She looked around the room. As of 9 o'clock a.m. this morning, Yamato Leisure has acquired the Obsidian Hospitality Group. I am the new chief executive officer. A stunned silence fell over the room. Someone dropped a ladle in the kitchen. "This is a joke," the head chef scoffed. "The waitress? You can't run a restaurant group. You can't even open a wine bottle without shaking." Sasha turned her gaze to him. It was a cold, appraising stare she had learned from Cal. "Chef, you're heavy on the salt. I know you take kickbacks from the produce vendor to accept subpar vegetables. I know you hide vodka in your water bottle at Station 3, and I know your food cost variance is off by 8% because you're stealing steaks out the back door." The chef turned pale. "You're fired," Sasha said. "Pack your knives." She turned back to the room. "Things are going to change. We are going to return to the root of hospitality, omotenashi, wholehearted service. If you can't handle that, leave now." Nobody moved. Over the next month, Sasha didn't just run the company. She surgically dissected aesthetics dead. While the days were spent retraining staff and redesigning menus to Cal's exacting standards, the nights were spent in the basement archives. This was the belly of the beast. The Obsidian Group wasn't just a restaurant chain. It was a holding company. And as Cal had suspected, it was the drain pipe for Julian Blackwood's dirty money. Sasha sat amidst towers of bankers' boxes, her eyes red from reading ledgers. Cal would often sit with her silently, reading a book, offering moral support. "It's not here," Sasha said one rainy Tuesday, slamming a file shut. "I've looked at 5 years of invoices. The numbers match. If Julian was laundering money through here, he's a magician." "Look at the renovations," Cal said, not looking up from his book. "I did. They renovated the downtown location in 2019. Cost $2 million, standard for a cosmetic refresh." $2 million for a space that is only 2,000 square feet? Cal asked. "That is 1,000 a square foot. Did they pave the floor with gold?" Sasha paused. She pulled the 2019 renovation file. She looked at the contractor listed. Vanguard Interiors. Her heart stopped. Vanguard, the same name as the construction firm that framed her father. She dug deeper. She cross-referenced the invoices. Vanguard Interiors had billed $500,000 for custom Italian marble. Sasha looked at the photos of the restaurant from 2019. The floors were wood. There was no marble. She pulled another invoice, $300,000 for HVAC overhaul. The maintenance logs showed the HVAC hadn't been touched since 2015. "He didn't spend the money," Sasha whispered. "He billed the restaurant for work that was never done. The restaurant paid Vanguard. And Vanguard," she frantically typed the tax ID of Vanguard Interiors into the corporate registry database Cal had given her access to. It was a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. "And who is the signatory?" Cal asked, standing up and walking over to her. Sasha scrolled to the bottom of the incorporation documents. It was a scribbled signature, barely legible. But below it was a printed name, Managing Director J. Blackwood. Sasha felt tears prick her eyes. This was it. This was the smoking gun. Julian had been siphoning millions out of his investors' pockets, washing it through the restaurant's expenses, and depositing it into his own offshore accounts. And he had used the same shell company structure that destroyed her father to do it. I have him, Sasha said, her voice trembling. I have him cold. Good, Cal said, his face was grim. Now we spring the trap. The reopening of the Obsidian was not merely a dinner service. It was a piece of theater meticulously directed by Keo Yamato. The restaurant had been closed for 30 days. In the high-stakes world of Seattle hospitality, being closed that long was usually a death sentence. But Kao had spun the narrative perfectly. He leaked rumors to the press about a radical reimagining and a return to purity. By the time the doors unlocked at 7 o'clock p.m. on a rainy Tuesday, the line of black SUVs stretched around the block. Inside, the transformation was startling. The heavy velvet curtains and gold leaf accents that Julian Blackwood had favored, decor that screamed new money, were gone. In their place was sleek raw walnut, hand-turned ceramic lighting, in arrangements of seasonal ikebana that looked more like sculpture than decoration. The air didn't smell of heavy butter and truffle oil anymore. It carried the crisp, clean scent of sudachi lime and charcoal. Julian Blackwood arrived at 7:45 p.m. He looked like a man who had not slept in a week. His skin had a gray, pasty quality, and his bespoke suit, usually tailored to within an inch of its life, hung loosely around his waist. He was accompanied by his attorney, a sharp-faced man named Preston, who checked his watch every 30 seconds. Julian was desperate. Since Cal had publicly pulled the acquisition deal, Blackwood Capital had been bleeding out. Investors were pulling funds by the hour. When the invitation from Yamato arrived, printed on thick handmade washi paper, Julian viewed it as a lifeline. He assumed the old man wanted to buy his distressed assets at a discount. It would be humiliating, yes, but it would keep him out of prison. Keep it together, Julian, Preston whispered as they handed their coats to the check-in staff. Let him do the talking. We take the liquidity, we settle the debts, and we rebuild. I know how to handle him, Julian snapped, adjusting his tie. He's just an old man with a savior complex. I'll flatter him, eat his raw fish, and sign the papers. Chloe, the former hostess who had once rolled her eyes at Cal, stepped forward. She was no longer chewing gum. She wore a sharp, minimalist uniform and held a tablet with professional grace. Mr. Blackwood, Chloe said, her voice cool and devoid of the subservience he was used to. The owner is expecting you in the private dining room. Good, Julian grunted, brushing past her. Let's get this over with. The private dining room at the Obsidian was a masterpiece of intimidation. It was a glass cube suspended slightly above the main floor, offering total acoustic privacy while remaining visually exposed. It was a fishbowl. Every diner in the restaurant, the senators, the tech moguls, the gossip columnists, could see who was inside. Julian climbed the short stairs and entered the glass room. Kao Yamato sat at the head of the long table. He was not wearing his tattered trench coat tonight. He wore a dark kimono of silk, radiating an aura of calm, immovable power. But Kao wasn't the only person at the table. At the opposite end, with her back to the door, sat a woman. She was looking out at the main dining room, watching the service. Her silhouette was sharp, her posture erect. Mr. Yamato, Julian said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He extended a hand. Thank you for the invitation. I trust we can put our previous misunderstanding behind us. Kyo did not stand. He did not shake the hand. He simply gestured to the empty chair in the middle of the table, the position of a subordinate being interrogated. Sit, Mr. Blackwood, Cal said. Julian's smile faltered. He sat, and Preston sat beside him, opening a briefcase. We have prepared this valuation of Blackwood Capital's remaining assets, Preston began, sliding a folder across the table. Despite the market volatility, the fundamentals are strong. I am not interested in your assets, Cal interrupted. His voice was soft, yet it seemed to drop the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. I am here to discuss your liabilities. Julian frowned. I don't understand. Why send the invite? I did not send the invite, Cal said. The CEO of Yamato Leisure sent it. I am merely a guest at her table. Cal nodded to the woman at the end of the table. Slowly, the swivel chair turned. Julian prepared himself to see some Japanese executive, perhaps a corporate shark Cal had flown in from Tokyo. Instead, he saw blue eyes. He saw blonde hair pulled back in a severe, commanding bun. He saw a face he had sneered at only weeks ago. For a solid 10 seconds, Julian's brain refused to process the visual data. You, Julian stammered. He looked at Cal, then back at her. A nervous, incredulous laugh bubbled up from his throat. The waitress? You've got to be kidding me. This is the CEO? Did you win a lottery ticket, honey? Sasha didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She sat with her hands clasped on top of a thick black file folder. Good evening, Julian, Sasha said. Her voice was unrecognizable from the timid server he remembered. It was resonant steel, reinforced. The Pinot Noir is breathing. I believe that was your preferred complaint. This is a joke, Julian spat, standing up. Yamato, you brought me here to be insulted by the help. I'm leaving. Sit down, Julian, Sasha commanded. She didn't shout, but the authority in her tone slammed him back into his chair. You aren't leaving. Not until we discuss the renovations of 2019. The blood drained from Julian's face so fast it looked like a magic trick. What? Sasha opened the black folder. The sound of the heavy paper turning was amplified in the silent room. I've spent the last month auditing the Obsidian Group's archives, Sasha said, not looking at the papers but staring directly into Julian's soul. It was a maze, very clever, but you made one mistake. You got arrogant. You thought no one would ever check the invoices for the HVAC system because you owned the building. She slid a single document across the table. Vanguard Interiors, Sasha said, a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. Managing Director Jay Blackwood. You build this restaurant, $12 million for marble floors that don't exist, and ventilation systems that were never installed. Preston, the lawyer, snatched the paper. He read it and his hands began to shake. He looked at Julian with horror. Julian, tell me you didn't sign these yourself. It's proprietary, Julian screamed, sweat breaking out on his forehead. That's corporate strategy. You have no right to those files. I'll sue you for industrial espionage. You can't sue the owner, Sasha said calmly. And I found something else in the archives, Julian. I found the email thread from 5 years ago, the one between you and Vanguard Construction. Julian froze. He stopped breathing. The email where you instructed them to siphon materials from the Tokyo project and to frame the lead engineer for the discrepancy. Sasha continued, her voice trembling slightly with suppressed rage. She reached into the folder and pulled out a photograph. It was the picture of her father, Robert Keating. She slammed it onto the glass table face up. My name is Sasha Keating, she declared. Robert Keating was my father. The silence that followed was absolute. Outside the glass walls, the restaurant hummed with life. But inside, a life was ending. He killed himself because of you, Sasha whispered, the tears finally glistening in her eyes, though her voice remained steady. You stole his reputation to cover your debts. You stole his life. I didn't know, Julian gasped. He was hyperventilating now, clawing at his collar. It was just business. I didn't know he had a daughter. We can work this out. I have money in Switzerland. Sasha, listen to me. I am listening, Sasha said, cold as ice. But they are listening too. She pointed to the glass door. Julian turned. Standing at the entrance of the private room were 4 agents wearing navy blue windbreakers with yellow lettering. FBI. Behind them stood a U.S. district attorney who looked very pleased with his evening. Mr. Blackwood, the lead agent said, stepping into the room. We've had a fascinating morning reading the files Miss Keating sent over. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering. No. Julian scrambled back, knocking his chair over. He looked at his lawyer. Preston, do something. Preston was already closing his briefcase. I can't represent you on RICO charges, Julian. You're on your own. The lawyer walked out, leaving him alone. The agents moved in. They grabbed Julian by the arms. He wasn't the powerful wolf of Wall Street anymore. He was a terrified animal. You can't do this, Julian shrieked as they cuffed him. His face pressed against the glass wall he had once looked through with such disdain. I'm Julian Blackwood. I built this city. You built nothing. Sasha stood up, her voice ringing out, finally drawing the attention of the entire main dining room. The guests below looked up, forks hovering halfway to their mouths, to see the spectacle of the city's most arrogant financier being handcuffed by federal agents. You built nothing but lies, and now the bill is due. As the agents dragged him toward the door, Julian twisted his head back, locking eyes with Sasha. Who are you? He screamed, his voice cracking. You're nobody. You're a waitress. Sasha walked to the edge of the glass, looking down at him as he was hauled away. I am the woman who served you, she said softly, and I am the woman who finished you. As the doors to the restaurant burst open and the flashing lights of police cruisers flooded the entryway, a strange sound filled the room. It started with Kao Yamato. He stood up and began to clap, a slow, rhythmic applause. Then Chloe joined in. Then the sous chef who had come out of the kitchen to watch. Then the diners, the senators, the moguls, the elite. They realized they were witnessing justice in its purest form. The applause swelled, growing louder and louder until it thundered against the glass walls of the private room. Sasha stood alone in the center of the fishbowl, bathed in the light. She looked at Cal. He bowed to her, a deep 45-degree bow of profound respect. Sasha took a deep breath. For the first time in 5 years, the weight on her chest was gone. She bowed back. The service was complete. Sasha Keating didn't just serve food that night. She served justice. In the heart of Seattle's glittering elite, where appearances dictate worth and arrogance reign supreme, the tale of Sasha Keating unfolds as a poignant reminder that true character shines brightest in the shadows of humility. Disguised in a frayed coat and quiet demeanor, Kao Yamato, the billionaire tycoon, endured 45 minutes of disdain, invisible to all but one compassionate waitress. Sasha, battered by life's hardships and her own hidden scars, chose kindness over conformity. She lit his candle, spoke his language, and defended his dignity against the venomous barbs of Julian Blackwood, a man whose wealth masked a hollow soul. What followed wasn't mere revenge. It was a symphony of justice, where the mighty fell, careers crumbled, and a father's tarnished legacy was redeemed. This story pierces the soul, teaching us that in a world obsessed with status symbols and superficial judgments, the greatest power lies in empathy and integrity. We often overlook the nobodies, the elderly stranger, the struggling server, forgetting that beneath worn exteriors beat hearts of gold, capable of reshaping destinies. Kao's wisdom echoes eternally. Judge not by how one treats equals, but by how they uplift those deemed beneath them. In our daily rush, this urges us to pause, to offer a smile, a seat, or a voice to the voiceless. For in those acts, we don't just change lives, we invite the universe's quiet reckonings, where goodness triumphs and arrogance shatters. Imagine if we all embrace this. Workplaces kinder, societies fairer, souls richer. It's a call to reflect. Have you ever dismissed someone based on looks, or stood up against injustice, no matter the punt? This narrative isn't fiction. It's a mirror to our humanity, stirring tears of recognition and hope. What lessons from this story resonate with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, perhaps a personal experience where kindness turned the tide. If stories like this inspire you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale of triumph and truth. Let's build a community of empathy together. Word count 278.